Oh, my lands, welcome to another amazing episode of the show. I'm Jay Connor, the Private Money Authority. I'm so glad that you are tuning in to this particular show because, listen, my friend, I have got a guest here that's information that you have not heard anywhere else. His name is Chris Prefontaine. I've had him on the show before. He's one of my most amazing guests, and the odds are you have not heard him yet. So with that, let's bring Chris onto the show and get started. Chris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Jay, good to see you again, buddy.
It is great to see you again as well, Chris. I appreciate you blocking out some time to be here on the show to share your many years of experience and what it is that you've got going on today that's working in this market. But before we get started, nobody understands and knows how to introduce Chris better than you do. So, Chris, introduce yourself. Tell us how you got started in real estate.
Yeah, I'll be brief because it's 30 and a half years now and we'll bore people. So I got started in real estate because I hung out with my father, who was not in real estate, but he had a conventional brick and mortar business, welding supply business. And he built his own buildings, Jay. And as he built them, I was too young to understand how this worked. But as he built them, he then leased them back to himself. And I remember saying to him when I was younger, I don't know how old, maybe 10, 12. I don't understand. You're the same person. How do you lease it back to yourself? And now, of course, with the way LLCs and everything work, I get it. But I didn't then. So I was in and around that environment. I then went off and built a bunch of homes. Then I bought a Realty Executive Franchise, sold that to Coldwell Banker. After that brings me to 2000. I started working my own investments and coaching people, but that led up to the crash. When the crash happened in 08, it took me 4 years to dig out, and that was because I was signed personally on all those notes, and it was a bit of a nightmare. I dug out. I didn't file bankruptcy, and that was the impetus to develop the terms niche. So for those of you not familiar with that, just creative real estate, very specifically how we do it. And that has built to today, myself, my son, my son-in-law, and a great team doing deals all around the country with who we call associates, but they basically will do deals while we coach them interactively. So there's no better way to learn. It bridges that gap of learning. And then we revenue share with them for so many deals, and then they're off on their own because they don't need us for life. So that's 30 and a half years in about a minute or two.
Excellent job, Chris. There's no way I could have done 30 years in 90 seconds. So let me ask you this question. Yeah. So as you know, as I know, as the person that's listening to us right now knows, there's all kinds of real estate. There's 100 different ways to be in real estate. There's single family houses, there's commercial, there's self-storage, there's land, on and on and on and on. There's new development, residential. And then once you decide which part of real estate you get in, then there's all kinds of creative strategies that, revolve around those different, strategies in real estate. So here's the question. How and why did you land on this particular niche called the terms niche? And before you answer that question, define what does terms and terms niche mean?
Sure, thanks. So terms niche to me means buying creatively either one of three ways: lease purchase, owner financing, and we niche down that. We'll talk about that. Or subject to existing financing. So how, that's the definition, but how and why did I do it? Coming out of 08, two things come to mind, Jay, immediately, and we can dig deeper if you want and peel the onion back. But two things that come up are, number one, I was personally signed on debt on about 23 projects or properties when 08 happened, and like a light switch went off. February of 08 hit me right between the eyes. So when I dug out, literally by February of 12, took 4 years, I said, all right, if we're going to do this again, like I was spent mentally, physically, it was stressful. So if we're going to do this again, what will we do? Sort of what are the rules we'll play by, if you will? And the things that just were glaringly obvious were, number one, we will not sign on debt ever again. Now, nobody would loan to me then, but I've rebuilt and I could now and I don't. So we don't sign personal any bank loans. We don't borrow, period, with very few exceptions. That's number one. Number two, I was a little frustrated as I sat and kind of went over what we would do. And just to give some context for the listeners, I went from about a $2.8 million property overlooking the water, which today is assessed at about $8 million, not assessed, valued, to a one-bedroom apartment. Talk about a humbling experience. One bedroom, my wife and I, to rebuild. Quite an endeavor. And when I did that, I said, all right, every January for the past, 2.5 decades, I would say, all right, real estate treated me well, but I got to kind of do it again. Like it's transactional. And a lot of the niches, not all, but in my world, it was building, it was flipping, it was rehab, it was raise the roof projects, it was condominium conversions. Those all paid me really well, but once. So I said, how can we get it so that it's not just that payday, but I can get some long-term sustainability? Federally, the 3 payday system, which is we get paid now on deals, we get paid over time, we get paid long-term. And that to me is the ideal business model for any business, not just what we do.
So the benefits of this term niche, number one, I just heard you say in recap, you're not signing any personal guarantees. You're not signing for debt, which obviously reduces your risk greatly. So when you're in this term niche, you're buying creatively. Let's dig down a little bit. You mentioned lease purchase. You mentioned seller financing. You mentioned subject to. I'd like to drill down for the person listening to us. Exactly what do you mean by controlling a property lease purchase? Are you buying it on lease purchase? Are you selling it on lease purchase? What do you mean by lease purchase?
Okay, good. So in all states except for Texas right now, we refer this as a sandwich lease. So we're going to tie the property up with the seller via a lease purchase. We're then going to file a notice of option so that we're on title and we're protected, most importantly, so they can't sell that property off to Uncle Joe or something happens to it. We then turn around and do a rent to own with our buyers. But here's a huge distinction, Jay, I want to point out, because I've been on shows and I've listened to shows where mentors talk about this. Our buyer program is extremely strenuous, where we have about a 2 to 5, COVID maybe pushed up to 7, but it wasn't bad, % default rate. Because in this case, my son, Nick, has a bunch of steps he brings them through to pre-qualify them and to make sure they're truly buyers, not renters that want to have a dream to maybe someday own and their credit's been messed up for 30 years, but truly buyers who truly need time.
And you're talking about the exit strategy.
Yeah. So we tie it up on a lease purchase and we exit on a rent to own. Now, there's plenty of advance where we'll give them incentive and maybe change that lease to a longer term vehicle for us and then owner finance them. But that's probably a different conversation.
So that's lease purchase. Is your desire, is your business model to actually help them or see them through getting their own financing, or are you happy with them working on that, so to speak, on their own?
Good question. So we point them and suggest to them where they should go for financing. We don't do it, but there's 2 things there, 2 buts. One is we make sure that part of their agreement is they've got to fulfill their mortgage ready steps, we call it. And if they get off track at any point, it defaults their purchase option, in which case they would just be a tenant. And again, we're about 2 to 7%. It'll come back to the 2 to 5, I think, post-COVID here. And then if we end up turning our deal, our side of the deal, into a longer term deal, i.e. change the lease to a sub 2 eventually, we'll give them a carrot, the buyer, a carrot. And we'll say, hey, if you get your deposit up to 20% over time, take your time. And if you never miss a payment, you'll never see a bank if you don't want to. We'll want to finance you. So there's all kinds of different ways to pivot, but that's the base model.
Got you. And then you talk about seller financing. What does that mean?
When we buy, you mean?
Yeah, when you're buying on seller financing.
So we go a little bit more narrow on this niche, Jay. Because owner financing is broad, we will look for properties pointedly, including the office building I bought 4 years ago, that are debt-free, free and clear. As you probably know, it's, I don't know, somewhere around a third of the properties. I talked to a mortgage broker in Florida the other day that told me in Naples, it's 52% of Naples are free and clear. I thought that was cool. So we look to talk with them. Why? Well, especially during this hot market, they don't need to sell. They would have presumably put a loan on it in the past, or, HELOC, or sold. What they want is some cool planning, estate, taxes, family. They want that kind of planning as long as they get their price. So we hunt for that, so to speak, and then they become the bank. We pay them monthly payments. Most of our deals are principal-only monthly payments, principal only. And so it's a great tool against any market changes, et cetera. Now, a quick example. We bought the office building I'm talking about. All my companies are in it, but I have tenants too. He was free and clear. He was a very savvy investor, big landowner. He said, I pointedly want owner financing, but he wanted interest. And I said, well, we buy with principal only. What we did is a hybrid. I paid principal only for 2 years, really got the principal down low. And then at that time, we took it, this was in 20, we took it and amortized the rest at his interest rate. We both won there, and he was super happy. I paid him his price, and I got a 20-year term.
Why would most sellers be happy with principal-only payments and no interest?
Well, here's my experience. Some want, I'll pay a small premium. Let's just say it's a house. Get the building out of the mix for a minute. If it's a house and it's worth, say, $300,000, I might pay $320 or $310. What that depends is how long they'll go out with me for principal-only payments. And so I call it ego, call it they want the best price from that component. They let us go on principal only. Second is, frankly, when the rates were as low as they were, I don't think they wanted to file for interest income and go through that mess with the little money it was. Most go for it if they get their price. Most sellers with residential anyway go for it.
Yeah, it's been my experience, and also through other colleagues such as yourself, when it comes to seller financing, for whatever reason, and tell me if you agree with me, the main important thing in the seller's mind is I want my price. I want my price. And you're now going to show them a way where they can get their price.
I agree 100% with you. And I said, call that ego or whatever it is. They just want to know that they won it on their price range. I agree with you. And sometimes I'll have to say to the seller, if they say any other variable like interest or down payment or higher monthly, I'll just say, look, there's like a quadrant here. We got price, we got monthly, we got term, and we got down if they bring it up. I don't. And so I say, I can't give you all four. Let's have an open conversation here. I can give you maybe a couple of them, but I can't give you all four. And we just have an open chat.
And that sounds fair, right?
Right.
It sounds fair because actually what I hear you saying in the conversation with a seller is, I want this to be win-win. I want it to win for you. I want you to get your price. It's got to be a win for me based on the strategy that we use to actually fund or get your property financed to where, it's going to be a win on either side of this deal, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And they feel good about that. And I'll also say things like, these are just like seeding in their mind, right? We're just seeding some thoughts. And one is I'll say, look, we're a conservative investor. If I try to get a longer term, we're conservative. And the last thing I want to do is call you back and ask for an extension. So I want to overperform for you, not under, and I don't want to overpromise. So this is why I'm asking for this term, and we don't default. And I just say that confidently. It's more about making them comfortable with that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. What percentage, best guess, unless you know specifically, what percentage of sellers with seller financing will sell to you no down payment?
That's a good one. I found that once I get over 600 in my market, over 600 grand or so, you're starting to test the waters of, I got to put something down. We bought a house on the water for $945 and had to put down $8 grand. I mean, that's literally nothing in my opinion. What we do say, Jay, is look, we're going to pay your transfer tax, because all our states we deal in have tax. Some don't for our students, but ours.
Yeah, well, here in North Carolina, we pay $2 per thousand.
Yeah, I think we're $4.56 per thousand. So I'll say to them, we'll pay your transfer tax. I don't expect you to come out of pocket. If I don't give you down payment, I'll pay your transfer tax. That usually works. And sometimes in their closing costs, but if they want it down, they're going to pay their own transfer tax and their own closing costs, in which case you do the math. It's not a big deal. So most of our properties are going to be under that price range. So I'm going to tell you that about 90 to 95% of our deals are no money down. My building was an exception. It was an income property. I had no problem putting some money down.
Well, for you to do 90% or so with no money down, that is phenomenal. And I would say your students really rely initially on your scripting as to how you're able to confidently have a conversation with a seller that's going to sell you with no money down.
Yeah, you know where this came up? This is like literally 2 hours ago. I got off of a 2-hour mastermind call, but it was with the higher level people we have in our community. And I used to mistakenly think, oh, you got to talk about higher level stuff and go into all these details. You know what, Jay? The last like 5 calls we did with them, this is the highest level now. We did scripts over and over and over, and they loved it, because when the market's crazy like it is, stick to the basics. Like, don't complicate it.
Absolutely. Do not complicate this business. And then we come to one of my very favorite creative strategies that you do and you teach, and that is buying subject to the existing note or the existing mortgage. So tell me, what does it mean to buy subject to the existing note?
Yeah, I love it too, by the way. And I find that the people that do the sandwich leases at the beginning, our students, they end up sort of, I'll call it graduating and understanding that they want to stay in these deals. So subject to just means I'm going to buy Mrs. Mary's home, and Mary, I'll just give you a scenario. Mary owes $250,000. Mary came out of COVID and is stressed out and needs someone to cover that like ASAP. So we'll buy that home from Mary. And we will, when you go to the closing table, if you've ever bought a home, you're used to seeing new money come to the table by way of a loan, and that's listed on the settlement statement. Instead, it says, subject to existing loan, the present balance is listed. You are buying that property, and that loan is staying in the seller's name, and it will stay in the seller's name until such time you cash it out. I can tell you that compared to pre and during 08 crash, I sleep a heck of a lot better mentally, physically, health-wise, knowing that out of the 85 or 90 million in real estate we control, we are not on one single loan. And so, yeah, it's one of my favorites, Jay, because you can get all kinds of creativity on the selling end too after you tie it up.
Chris, I never heard of this strategy of buying subject to the existing note until February 2009. And when I heard about it, my first thought was, who in their right mind would sell me their house, transfer the title into my entity's name to where I own the property, and they're going to leave the mortgage in their name? I'm not assuming the mortgage. They're leaving the mortgage in their name. I'm agreeing to make their mortgage payment. Who in their right mind would trust me to make their payments? I have figured out the answer to that. What's your answer?
Well, I think this is what you're looking for. If it's not, please tell me. Because I find that we talked about refinancing earlier. That's people that are not in any way stressed out. I go to free and clear. Opposite end of the spectrum completely are the people that need financial relief, or something to trigger some urgency, like a divorce. We just did one. Like a death. We sadly just did one of those. Or like post-COVID, we just did one of those. So it's usually people that are stressed out that need immediate relief. 2 quick examples. Gentleman calls me and says, you talked to me when I was a facility by owner. I wasn't in a hurry. I got custody of my grandson. My truck is packed and we're going cross country in 4 days. Can you come do that thing you talked about? And he sold to us on sub 2. Recently, sadly, these are coming out of the woodwork. I'd love to know if you're getting these. And that is this older woman in Michigan, one of my students, called and she couldn't afford a $600 first mortgage, and a $200 second, and she was only $3,000 in arrears, and she begged us to take the home, and there was already 60 grand sitting there of equity. She just wanted relief, and when she heard that we help buyers get into homes, she said, "You're it." And she'd been pounded by wholesalers and everybody else. So I don't know. Are you getting a bunch of those on your end probably too from post-COVID?
Out of the woodwork, Chris.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, maybe you have the answer. I don't. I just know that I'm getting more subject to sellers. I'm getting actually more all cash sellers. I'm just getting more all sellers. And what's so interesting about it in this market is, of course, all these sellers are coming from our marketing of off-market houses that are not in the multiple listing service. There's no inventory in the multiple listing service. So we're buying 100% of our houses from owners directly, and we put it in the multiple listing service. If we're cashing out, if we're not selling on terms, it's immediately gone. Have you got a guess why now?
I think it's a bit of a perfect storm, in my opinion, meaning a couple things. No priority order here. One is rates is starting to go up. Okay, well, clearly, and not everywhere yet, this is trickled down, but we're hearing from the community that there's a bit of a panic because the buyers now, tens of thousands, well, hundreds of thousands, have just get pushed to the sideline. They can't afford the house. They just get the rates. My son-in-law locked the rate in 3.5% 90 days ago. Didn't do that deal and bought a house last week, and his rate lock is 5.35. 90 days. You just kicked everyone out of the market that was borderline. So then the seller demand has to come down. This isn't like an opinion. So that's one thing. The second thing is what you and I just said. A lot of these post-COVID, sadly, are kind of coming up, whether it was forbearance or they, had a job hiccup, whatever. There's a lot of ripple effect from COVID, all kinds of different. We're hearing that. And yes, we're seeing way more sub-twos coming to us.
Yeah, same thing for me. In any of your business model, Chris, do you use private money?
Very, very, very few times, because friends, my accountant, my attorney, they'll call and say, "Hey, I got this. Can you do something with it?" And then what we'll do is we'll just get a little more aggressive, and we'll call the same people. But it's those people that if they had just 10 or 20 grand, for example, to use an example, you'd pick up, 30, 40 grand in equity. Okay, I'm good with that all day long. But usually we don't. I don't teach that because a new person to go out and raise money, I don't teach that. You do very well with that. I just don't teach that, So we do it personally as a family team when there's an opportunity available.
Yeah. The way that I use private money when I'm not paying all cash, and of course, as you know, I buy a lot of houses all cash with private money. But when I'm buying 25% of my deals creatively, subject to the existing note, a lot of times I'll use private money, and I'm sure you have too. I'll use private money in second position to a small amount of money, 20,000, 30,000, to either bring payments current or if there's some light repair. And my definition of a light rehab is less than $10,000 is my definition. And then I'll use private money in that case. And then, Chris, this question, in this crazy market of where it is a challenge to find deals on houses, what are your top 3 favorite ways today to find motivated sellers that are not in the multiple listing service?
Yeah, right this second, there's 2 that come to mind. For rent by owners, they're a little tired. We're finding landlords with like 1 to 10 properties they're just literally saying to us, "I'm done. I'm all set." The second thing that comes to mind, because the expireds are starting to come back, but it's not my hot one right now. The second one that I love, that I think personally, I love your opinion, is tried and true always, which is absentee out-of-state owners. And our script is easy because we just nonchalantly say, with all the craziness in the market and the chaos and post-COVID, we didn't know if you had plans on selling. Picking up a lot of off-market properties from that simple list. And that's always been a really good list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. My favorite list right now is out-of-state, absentee owners, high equity.
Yeah.
Out of state, absentee, high equity. Why is that? Well, a lot of those people with that scenario are empty nesters, or they are older people. And the property in a lot of cases has just gotten to the point to where they're done. They want to downsize. They don't want to deal with it. And for those particular people, actually outbound calling has been my best actual strategy to initiate a conversation, because these people actually enjoy talking to you because they're not talking to anybody else.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, that's mine. So you got a lot of experience. You got over 30 years of experience. I'm gonna hit you from the broadside. So here comes the question. Biggest lesson learned and or biggest mistake made. If you knew then what you knew now, what would you have done different?
Yeah, it has to be, not to pour more salt in my wound, but it has to be my experience with the 2008 crash. And that was signing on loans. It sounds simple, but I get calls, Jay, weekly, and I'm sure you do. And the call sounds like this. Chris, this bank or the government loans would let me borrow this many times for this many houses because my credit's good. So I can do that, right? And then I can do your method. And I say, not unless it's your personal residence. So we just don't do that anymore. And until you've lived it, and obviously you've gone through cycles like me, it's hard for someone with great credit getting into real estate to understand, no, don't do that. And here's why. So that's my biggest mistake, was gladly sharing my credit score and my signature. And how we got out of it was we just don't do it anymore. It sparked this. You couldn't have convinced me in 2008 that was a good thing, but it was a great thing because it's what sparked what we've built now.
Oh, absolutely. And if you had not been through that experience, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be where you are today.
Never.
Isn't it amazing? As painful as it is, most of the growth always takes place in the valley.
No, there's no question. And just for context for the listeners, I'm talking, when I said stressful, I'm talking IRS, credit card companies, a tow truck showing up at 4:30 in the a.m. when I went to walk the dog, like you name it, it happened. And so that's why we went to a one-bedroom apartment, rebuilt, and now I'm basically cash. Like there is no debt. So you can do it. If you're listening, you've got any challenge, you can do it.
So Chris, what is it about your persona? What is it about your mindset? What is it about you personally that got you and gets you to push through no matter what happens?
Has to be the people I listen to, like bar none, people I listen to. You and I have some mutual contacts and friends. And some of them, the very same people, said to me, that's nothing. And here's what you do. So reach up, speak to people that have been through cycles. If you speak with someone like Jay or I, you're going to learn that it's okay. There's ways to pivot with every single market. It's who you rub elbows with. And you cannot underestimate that by any stretch of the imagination. Don't get caught with what some podcast hosts have said to me. They call it new money, like since 2008. And I know it's a long time now for some. It's 13 or 14 years. But the fact is, you've got to be hanging out with the right people that have been through market cycles and even personal cycles too. And then you can lean on them. Go lean on them. And don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Excellent advice, Chris. I know you've got a fantastic gift to give. And what is that?
A whole bunch of stuff. So I when people say, we're going to give you our books, we're going to give you this, just put your credit card in for free shipping. No need. Jay's going to provide links. You're going to get some cool gifts just for hearing us on the show today. And that's going to be the Amazon best-selling books. And likely we'll throw in some other goodies for Jay's tribe.
Yeah. So here is the link, folks. This is the link, the only link that you need to write down or listen to and take action on. Go to www.jayconner.com/Chris, CHRIS. Again, that's jayconner, JAYCONNER.com /Chris, CHRIS. And Chris and his team will actually send you his best-selling books. You don't even have to pay shipping. I mean, it's coming to you in the mail. Chris, take a second and give them just a taste of what they're going to get.
Yeah, so I'm from New England, so we're blunt, we're to the point, we're very candid. In the Real Estate on Your Terms book, it got revised during COVID. That was not planned. I wish I could tell you I was that smart. I didn't know that was coming. We were revising it. So we made it very, very COVID and post-COVID specific in what you should be doing. So that's the hard copy book. And then there's one called Deal Structure Overtime, where we rip apart deals, but we also kind of peel back the green curtain and show you the nuances, the good, the bad, the challenges, where we messed up. And it really goes into how you get these deals structured the right way to create some amazing 3 payday deals.
That's awesome. There you have it, folks. My good friend, my expert, my brilliant real estate investing friend, Chris Prefontaine, offering the very valuable training for free. You don't even have to pay shipping. Again, get it over at jayconner.com /Chris, CHRIS. Chris, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Always good to chat with you, and I'm glad people could listen.
There you have it. Take action, folks. Don't miss out on this. There you have it, my friends. Another episode of this show. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, wishing you all the best. And here's to taking your business to the next level. We'll see you right here on the next show.